Weekly Meeting, written and read by Malcolm Cowper. Every Wednesday morning at 11 a.m, a group of distinguished people gather in a disused cellar below the Houses of Parliament. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss the current state of the world, the participants bringing to bear their vast experience gained over many years. It is not a particularly comfortable occasion for them. It's cold, dark and damp, but it doesn't matter because they're all dead. The participants are the ghosts of famous people from the past, mainly politicians, but also writers, artists and even the odd pop star. Their meetings are of no value because even if they ever reach a conclusion, they wouldn't be able to transmit it to anyone. And nobody would listen anyway. No, the real purpose of the meetings is to alleviate the boredom of an indefinite life in paradise, or the other place. Winston Churchill lit a cigar and called the meeting to order. "May I remind you, Sir Winston, that the Houses of Parliament operate a no-smoking policy," said Queen Elizabeth I. "Ha! That's rich coming from you, Your Majesty, considering your hero, Sir Walter Raleigh, introduced tobacco to England." "Yes, well, he hadn't read the Royal College of Surgeons' report linking smoking to cancer. Anyway, he told me smoking was good for the digestion." "Well, it didn't do me any harm," said Churchill. "I was over 90 when I died, and I smoked at least 10 cigars a day." "That's because you could afford to buy expensive cigars," said Karl Marx. "Not like the working men who had to make do with woodbines. No wonder they coughed their guts out. You're a typical aristocrat, exploiting the proletariat." "I think the leaders of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, inspired by you, did a pretty good job of exploiting the proletariat," said Churchill. "They may have claimed that everyone was equal, but as George Orwell said, some were more equal than others. And that despicable man Putin is doing a good job of carrying on in the same way, even though communism is supposed to have ended. I think he fancies himself as another Stalin." "Did somebody mention my name?" came an unfamiliar voice. "Stalin?" declared Churchill. "What are you doing here? Has Satan allowed you out on day release?" "Yes, and about bloody time. He's been making me stir up the fires of hell non-stop for the last 50 years. It's not fair. My fingers are all burnt and blistered." "Well, you were a pretty murderous character in your time," said Churchill. "How many people did you kill? 20 million? "What does it matter? I won the war, didn't I? You British and American cowards would never have beaten the Germans on your own." "Hang on, Stalin," interjected Napoleon Bonaparte. "You didn't win the war. Your fucking winter did. It beat the Germans the same as it beat me. And at least I led my troops into battle. How far behind the line were you at Stalingrad?" Now, chaps, let's not fall out," said Franklin D. Roosevelt. "We all played our part. Apart from the French. They gave in." Up jumped General Charles de Gaulle, all 6'5" of him. His head almost hit the low ceiling. Good job he was wearing his kepi. "I protest," he thundered. "The French fought as bravely as any." "Not as bravely as in my day," said Napoleon. Gentlemen, said Roosevelt. "Let's be done with all this talk of war. Let's think of what we achieved, how we saved the world from tyranny." "The trouble with all you people," said Oliver Cromwell, "is you're all godless. I saved England from the tyranny of King Charles I. He should have kept his head and listened to me. Then he might have, kept his head. I introduced Puritanism into England and abolished fripperies such as Christmas. Just think, if Charles II hadn't reintroduced it, you'd be saving a fortune on Christmas presents. And you wouldn't be having to listen to a bloody noddy holder singing, 'And here it is, Merry Christmas,' in all the shops every blasted year." "Do you know," said Charles Dickens, "you remind me of a character in one of my books, Ebenezer Scrooge. He didn't like Christmas either, but after three spirits had whispered a few things in his ear, he changed completely. bought a huge turkey for his clerk's family. You can't beat good spirits at Christmas, especially gin and tonic with ice and lemon. Well, you can thank us Americans for turkeys. We introduced them to England, said Mark Twain, feeling he'd been upstaged by a British author. Shame about that, said Dickens. I can't stand turkeys, especially the ones you elect as presidents. Hey, that's enough, said Roosevelt. The office of President of the United States of America is the most prestigious in the world. And, Mr. Marx, it's not just you that believes in equality. The first sentence of our Constitution says, all men are created equal. All men? Queried Karl Marx. What about the Africans who you shipped over in their thousands as slaves? What about the Indians whose land you stole? And why all men? What about women? Roosevelt shuffled uncomfortably and ran his finger under his collar. Yeah, well, it was drawn up a long time ago. Times have changed since then. Churchill came back in. You're right, Mr. President. Times have certainly changed since 1776. I don't think the Founding Fathers would be very impressed with America today, with the riots and people shooting each other all the time. Don't talk to me about shooting, said John Lennon. I only went to answer the door and this fucking homicidal maniac shot me. What had I ever done to upset him? All Yoko and I ever wanted was peace and love. So tell me, Mr. President, why do you let everyone in America own a gun? You're asking for all these mass shootings. Don't keep picking on me, said Roosevelt truculently. Ask George Washington over there. He introduced the gun laws. Well, we had to, said Washington. That was in the days of the frontier. We didn't have proper law and order. People had to defend themselves against Indians and bandits. Yes, but you don't get Indians and bandits attacking people these days, said John. Though you do get Donald Trump's supporters. They're a bunch of bandits. Speaking of Donald Trump, said Emmeline Pankhurst, how dare he claim the 2020 election was stolen just because he lost? And women believe him. When I think how we suffragettes chained ourselves to railings and jumped under galloping horses to win the right of women to vote, it makes me weep how many of them support that lying, misogynistic, narcissistic scumbag. I really wonder why we bothered fighting for women to have the vote, especially when so many can't get off their fat arses and go to the polling stations. Well, really, madam, I take exception to your language. It's most unladylike, declared Churchill. You're a fine one to talk about language, Mr. Churchill, making V signs at everyone during the war, said Mrs. Pankhurst. That was a misunderstanding, retorted Churchill. I didn't know it meant something different the other way round. At that moment there came a thunderous roar from above. Ah, said Churchill, Prime Minister's questions. I always like to go up and watch from the gallery. Not that I can bear to see these nincompoops making a dog's breakfast of things. I wonder who's the Prime Minister this week. Well, carry on, ladies and gentlemen. Stay as long as you like. Last person put the lights out. But the others felt they had been there long enough, and one by one they disappeared into thin air until finally the cellar reverted to its usual ghostly silence.